Secretary, please call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senator Aquino, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lacson, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcoleta, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pangilinan, Senator Soto, Senator Tulfo Erwin, Senator Tulfo Rafi, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar Camille, Senator Villar Mark, Senator Zubiri, the Senate President.
With 22 senators present, Chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, at this juncture and before we proceed, may I be allowed to just acknowledge some guests from the gallery? Guests of Senator Legarda from the Office of UN Resident Coordinator in the Philippines, Mr. Arnold Peral and Mr. Mattia Kovac. Guests of this representation and Senator Alan Cayetano, representatives from the Tarlac Agricultural University led by President Silverio Ramon Salunson. Guests of Senator Jinggoy Estrada, LGU officials of General Santos City led by Mayor Lorelai Pacquiao, Mayor Ricky Cuenca of La Libertad, Zamboanga del Norte. Guests of Senator Ejercito, Mayor Alfie Soriano of Malasiki, Pangasinan. Guests of Senator Kiko Pangilinan, Mayor Julie Ann Makasait of Real Quezon, ASEC Nicoles Manalo, and officials from the Department of Agriculture, Assistant National Statistician Mark Pasasio, and other PSA officials. Guests of Senator Risa Ontiveros, LGU officials of Abra de Ilog, Occidental Mindoro, led by Mayor Maria Gloria Constantino, and guests of the Senate, Mr. President, our former colleague from the House of Reps, former Congressman Willie Villarama of the great province of Bulacan. We welcome all of them in this August chamber.
To the aforementioned guests, welcome to your Senate. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we defer the approval of the Journal of the 9th Session, Wednesday, August 13, 2025. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Any objection? Hearing none, Secretary is directed to comply.
Bills on first reading, Senate number 501, an act mandating the Philippine Postal Corporation to adopt a modernized zone improvement plan code system. Senator Escudero.
To the Committees on Government Corporations and Public Enterprises and Local Government.
502, providing for the revised government auditing code of the Philippines. Senator Escudero.
Before the Chair acts on the motion, may the Chair instruct the Sergeant at Arms to kindly maintain order in the first gallery. May the Chair also remind our guests in the first gallery to kindly settle down. Secretary, may proceed. To the Committees on Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Code, Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
Senate number 503, an act amending Section 7 of RA 10931, the Universal Access to Quality Tertiary Education Act. Senator Escudero.
To the Committee on Higher Technical and Vocational Education.
504, an act institutionalizing a governance framework for the establishment, operation, and recognition of local universities and colleges and for other purposes. Senator Escudero.
To the Committees on Higher Technical and Vocational Education, Local Government, and Ways and Means.
505, an act strengthening the mental health services of state universities and colleges, appropriating funds and for other purposes. Senator Escudero.
To the Committees on Higher Technical and Vocational Education, Health and Demography, and Finance.
Senate number 506, an act establishing a legal scholarship and return service program for the serving students and appropriating funds therefore. Senator
To
Escudero.
the Committees on Higher Technical and Vocational Education, Justice and Human Rights, and Finance.
507, creating an additional branch in the 2nd Judicial Region to be stationed in Aurora, Isabela, amending for the purpose Section 14, Paragraph E of BP 129, the Judicial Reorganization Act of 1980 as amended and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Escudero.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights, and Finance.
508, prohibiting online gambling and the promotion of gambling-related content, strengthening digital enforcement, providing penalties, and for other purposes. Senator Legarda.
To the Committees on Games and Amusement and Public Information and Mass Media.
509, establishing a national framework for food waste prevention, recovery, and redistribution, mandating the safe donation and utilization of surplus food, strengthening multi-sectoral action against hunger, and for other purposes. Senator Legarda.
To the Committees on Agriculture, Food and Agrarian Reform, Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, Ways and Means, and Finance.
510, preserving the country's traditional folk arts as part of its intangible cultural heritage, amending RA 11333, the National Museum of the Philippines Act, and for other purposes. Senator Legarda.
To the Committee on Culture and the Arts.
5 by 1, Anak establishing the National Center for Geriatric Health and Research Institute, defining its powers and functions, creating regional geriatric specialty centers in the Department of Health retained hospitals and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Legarda.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Ways and Means, and Finance.
512, an act providing for the protection of geographical indications for agricultural or natural unprocessed or wild products, processed products, wines and spirits, or any products of handicraft or industry. Senator Legarda.
To the Committees on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, and Finance.
513, an act establishing the National Public Service College to develop a new generation of competent and ethical government leaders and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Legarda.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, Higher Technical and Vocational Education, and Finance.
514, an act amending Section 7 of RA 10931, the Universal Access to Quality Tertiary Education Act, to enhance the efficiency, equity, and accountability of the tertiary education subsidy program. Senator Legarda.
To the Committees on Higher Technical and Vocational Education, and Finance.
515, an act institutionalizing the national results-based governance, strengthening monitoring, evaluation, and utilization systems across all branches of government. Senator Legarda.
To the Committees on Economic Affairs and Finance.
516, establishing the Philippine National Public Park System, appropriating funds therefore. Senator Legarda.
To the Committees on Urban Planning, Housing and Resettlement, Tourism, Ways and Means, and Finance.
517, an act institutionalizing the establishment of seed libraries to promote local biodiversity, food security, community resilience, and climate adaptation, providing for a phased implementation, appropriating funds therefore, and for other purposes. Senator Legarda.
To the Committees on Agriculture, Food and Agrarian Reform, Environment, Natural Resources and Climate Change, Ways and Means, and Finance.
518, an act establishing the Young Farmers and Future Folk Challenge Program, creating for the purpose the Young Farmers and Future Folk Challenge Council, and appropriating funds therefore. Senator
To
Legarda.
the Committees on Agriculture, Food and Agrarian Reform, Youth, Ways and Means, and Finance.
Senate number 519, an act institutionalizing a national framework for the designation, restoration, and management of coastal greenbelt zones to strengthen disaster risk reduction, climate adaptation, and coastal biodiversity conservation, establishing the National Coastal Greenbelt Management Action Plan, providing funds, and for other purposes. Senator Legarda.
To the Committees on Environment, Natural Resources and Climate Change, and Finance.
520, an act mandating the grant of additional compensation to private sector employees who are required to report for work during declared calamities and emergency alerts, establishing implementing mechanisms therefore, and imposing penalties for non-compliance. Senator Legarda.
To the Committees on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development, and Finance.
521, an act establishing the Aklan Piña Museum and Cultural Center in the municipality of Calibo, Aklan, its satellite centers, defining its purposes and appropriating funds therefore. Senator
To
Legarda.
the Committees on Culture and the Arts, and Finance.
522, declaring preferential rights of municipal fisherfolk by declaring the 15-kilometer municipal waters as exclusively reserved for their use, protecting municipal waters from commercial fishing, providing support measures for sustainable livelihood, and for other purposes. Senator Legarda.
To the Committees on Agriculture, Food and Agrarian Reform, and Local Government.
523, an act institutionalizing a national anti-corruption mainstreaming agenda, strengthening integrity systems and accountability mechanisms across all branches and levels of government, promoting a culture of tapat na paglilingkod in public service and appropriating funds therefore. Senator
To
Legarda.
the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, Public Information and Mass Media, and Finance.
524, institutionalizing electronic publication as a legally valid mode of official publication for laws, regulations, and government issuances, promoting environmental sustainability, transparency, and digital inclusion, and for other purposes. Senator
To
Legarda.
the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Public Information and Mass Media.
525, institutionalizing cleanliness, accessibility, and the regular maintenance of public spaces and facilities in major cities, establishing a cleanliness audit system, appropriating funds, and for other purposes. Senator
To
Legarda.
the Committees on Local Government, Public Works, and Finance.
526, institutionalizing sustainable and low-impact loading standards for government websites and online services, promoting environmentally responsible digital infrastructure, and for other purposes. Senator
To
Legarda.
the Committee on Sustainable Development Goals in Innovation and Futures Thinking.
527, promoting the use of electric and hybrid vehicles in government fleets, establishing a national transition framework, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator
To
Legarda.
the Committees on Energy and Finance.
528, establishing urban walkability and safe pathways standards nationwide, mandating pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure in all new bridge and toll road projects, providing for a phased implementation of the Safe Pathways Network, creating the National Transport Awards, and for other purposes. Senator Legarda.
To the Committees on Sustainable Development Goals and Innovation, Futures Thinking, Public Works, Ways and Means, and Finance.
529, an act extended the duration of the Second Congressional Commission on Education, amending for the purpose RA 11899, the Second Congressional Commission on Education Act. Senator Legarda.
To the Committees on Basic Education and Higher Technical Vocational Education.
530, allowing the Department of Education the flexibility to determine the pedagogical approaches to be implemented in the basic education curriculum, amending Section 5 of RA 10533, the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, Senator Legarda.
To the Committee on Basic Education.
531, an act amending Section 5, Paragraph 3 of RA 9225, the Citizenship Retention and Reacquisition Act of 2003, Senator Legarda.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
532, creating the National Transitional Justice and Reconciliation Commission for the Bangsamoro, establishing a Transitional Justice and Reconciliation Program for the Bangsamoro, appropriating funds therefore, Senator Legarda.
To the Committees on Local Government, National Defense and Security, Peace, Unification and Reconciliation, and Finance.
533, an act exempting qualified indigents from the payment of professional examination fees and for other purposes, Senator
To
Legarda.
the Committees on Civil Service,
Bilang-
Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, and Finance.
534, an act amending certain provisions of RA 11900, the Vaporized Nicotine and Non-Nicotine Products Regulation Act, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Health and Demography and Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship.
535, granting post-maternity flexible work arrangement and expanding career leave, amending for the purpose RA 11210, the 105-day expanded maternity leave law, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committee on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality.
536, allowing the adoption of alternative work arrangements, amending for the purpose PD 442, the Labor Code of the Philippines, as amended, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resource Development.
537, an act institutionalizing the participation of civil society organizations in the preparation and authorization process of the annual national budget, providing effective mechanisms therefore and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Finance and Electoral Reforms and People's Participation.
538, an act institutionalizing and enhancing the Skill Certificate Equivalency Program of the Civil Service Commission and the Technical Education and Skills Authority, and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulations, Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development, and Finance.
539, an act defining and penalizing marital infidelity, amending for the purpose Act Number 3815, the Revised Penal Code, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality.
540, an act prohibiting discrimination on the basis of age, sex, civil status, color, economic status, ethnicity, medical condition, physical disability, political opinion or affiliation, race or religious belief, providing penalties therefore and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, and Cultural Communities, and Muslim Affairs.
541, an act institutionalizing a national values, etiquette, and moral uprightness program and instituting a values-oriented governance, creating for the purpose the Commission on Filipino Values and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committee on Culture and the Arts.
542, an act granting hazard pay to workers in critical industries during a state of calamity or emergency or public health emergency, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committee on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development.
543, an act creating hazard pay to covered employees of the government and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
544, mandating the establishment of nursing homes for the abandoned, neglected, and attached or homeless senior citizens, amending RA 7432, an act to maximize the contribution of senior citizens to nation building, grant benefits, and special privileges, and for other purposes as amended and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, Local Government, Ways and Means, and Finance.
545, prohibiting the indiscriminate use of beacons, sirens, and other emergency vehicle lights and audio accessories for moving motor vehicles except as prescribed by law, providing penalties and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Public Services and Finance.
546, an act institutionalizing a national telemedicine system in the Philippines, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Health and Demography and Finance.
547, an act further amending RA 7836, the Philippine Teachers Professionalization Act of 1994, as amended by RA 9293, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committee on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Professional Regulation.
548, an act mandating food manufacturers to display color-coded nutritional information on food packaging and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Health and Demography and Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship.
549, an act providing a fuel subsidy for municipal fisheries, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator
To
Villanueva.
the Committees on Agriculture, Food and Agrarian Reform, and Finance.
550, an act providing for a Magna Carta for workers in the informal economy and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development, and Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, Mr. President, I move to elect the following as members of the Commission on Appointments. on the part of the majority, Senators Alan Cayetano, De La Rosa, Ejercito Estrada, Bongo, Marcoleta, Marcos, Tulfo, Villanueva, and Villar. So move, Mr. President.
What is the pleasure of the distinguished minority floor leader?
May I know how many members of the majority that the majority leader is electing into the Commission on Appointments?
The majority leader will please respond.
Mr. President, we are electing 10 members of the majority in the Commission on Appointments, Mr. President.
May I know why the computation is the majority members of the so-called majority are getting 10 members into the Commission on Appointments?
Yes,
The
Mr.
majority
President.
leader may reply.
Mr. President, the computation is based on an 80-20 representation from the majority and the minority. 80% of 12 members would be equal to 9.6 members, which may be rounded out to 10 members. 20% of 12 members would equal to 2.4 members, which is rounded out to 2. If you look at the composition, Mr. President, right now of the Senate, we have 19 members in the majority. Over 24 is 0.79, Mr. President. 5 members of the minority, over 24 is 0.20. And if you multiply, Mr. President, 0.79 times 12 is 9.6, 0.20 times 12 is 2.4 members, Mr. President.
May I know the basis of the percentages being mentioned by the majority leader, Mr. President? Because the last word I know is that the Supreme Court has decided that if there is controversy in the composition of the Commission on Appointments, it is very clear that the Senate must follow the party lines and the party representation. So if this body elects to follow the Supreme Court decision on the articles of impeachment, why can't they follow the decision of the Supreme Court when it comes to the computation of membership in the Commission on Appointments? So therefore, there is no such thing as 9.6, 9.5, 9.5, 2.5, 2.4. It should be members of the NPC, 6. 3 of them should be in the CA. Members of the NP, Nationalista Party, is 2.5 or 5 of them. So therefore, 2.5, 2.5 should be in the Commission on Appointments. And then the rest are single members of each party, and therefore they could talk to the other members so that their 0.5 can be a total of 1%, 1 for each representation. There are easily 11. Oh no, the PDP has 3 members. PDP Laban has 3 members, Senator Bongo and Senator De La Rosa and Senator Robin Padilla. So their representation in the CA should be 1.5. Right now, I'm already hearing Senator Bongo and Senator De La Rosa as members of the CA. What about the other members? What about their political parties? I think this should not be the case to be followed, Mr. President. That the whim of the majority or the whim of the numbers shall prevail. I don't think so. We
What
should
is-
follow the rule then, if that is the case. We have been discussing this with Senator Estrada. Senator Villanueva has tried to talk to me about it. What we're saying is that we could come up with a formula that will also jibe with the Supreme Court decision.
If I may,
So why all of a sudden coming up with something like this, and then coming up with so percentages that an economist could not even understand?
Mr. President, if I may.
Before recognizing the Honorable Zubiri, Chair would like to recognize first the majority floor leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, we put on record that we submit to the statements made by our minority leader that it should be based from the Supreme Court's decisions, Mr. President. May I quote, Mr. President, in Coseteng versus Mitra, the Supreme Court noted that the House membership was based on 80-20 representation, almost the same, Mr. President, as what we mentioned earlier after rounding up the proportional representation of the LDP members comprising the majority during that time, Mr. President. Let me quote, Mr. President, the decision. The composition of the House membership in the Commission on Appointments was based on proportional representation of the political parties in the House. There are 160 members of the LDP in the House, and they represent 79% of the House membership. 80% of 12 members in the Commission on Appointments would equal 9.6 members, which may be rounded out to 10 from the LDP. Mr. President, noting, Mr. President, in the recent Congresses, membership in the CA has not been based on representation of political parties, but rather on proportional representation. And in this case, Mr. President, we computed, Mr. President, the members of the majority and the minority bloc in the Senate. Also, Mr. President, let me point out, in the same formula the Supreme Court cited in its decision, Gingona versus Gonzalez, the practice of rounding off that has not been consistently followed in the 15th and the 19th Congress. Mr. President, in the same Supreme Court decision, the SC explicitly mentioned, it is also a fact accepted by all such parties that each of them is entitled to a fractional membership on the basis of the rule on proportional representation of each of the political parties or coalition, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, if the question is every senator would have a 0.5 fractional membership, the senator does not actually hold that 0.5 fractional membership, Mr. President. Ang may-ari po nito ay yung koalisyon. Ito pong sinasamahan niya na bloke. And that's why, Mr. President, if the question is whether or not a senator from the majority bloc, for instance, would give up his or her fractional membership to another party, it cannot be done, Mr. President, as the proportional allocation of seats belongs to, again, to the party, coalition, or bloc, and not the senators themselves. And the Supreme Court is very clear that a senator is not ipso facto entitled to a CA seat. I submit, Mr. President, and lastly, Mr. President, again, may I be allowed to mention this, in the Gingona resolution issued by the Supreme Court, let me quote, respondents, however, accepted the fact that for the purpose of determining the proportional representatives of each political party to the Commission on Appointments, the basis thereof, Mr. President, the basis thereof is the actual number of members of each political party at the time of election of the members of the Commission on Appointments in the Senate. And that's why, Mr. President, even though this representation is moving for this particular motion, Mr. President, this representation would submit to the wisdom, a collective wisdom of the members of this institution. I submit, Mr. President.
Senator Zubiri is recognized for his interjection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with due respect to the majority leader, usually, if it's not political party that makes a decision for us on who will be heading this commission appointments, we usually look for partners. We've been doing that since 2007, Mr. President. I remember in 2016, my partner was Senator Richard Gordon. And he allowed me to take my seat in the CA actually for almost 2 terms, or two Congresses, which is the 6th, 17th, and 18th Congresses. And may kahati po ako, kaya 0.5 kami. He could have taken the first 1.5 years and I could have taken the second 1.5 years. But what he did is he gave it to me, hindi na siya umupo sa kanyang position or karapatan bilang CA member. Kaya dito lumalabas, mga kababayan, no, sa ating Senate President, may ka-partner po tayo. So, that's why we computed it at 9.5 and 2.5. That's also the right of the minority to have the 0.5 seat. Kaya nga sabi ko nga, Mr. President, maybe if we cannot get ourselves from that deadlock that there's a 0.5 seat, But we must at least recognize that the minority has the 0.5 seat. I mean, schematics lang yan eh. 0.4 yung sa majority, 0.6. Pero sa totoo yan, 0.5 yan, kalahati-kalahati yan, Mr. President. Because we share our seat with another member. That's how it is. That's the tradition. I know Senator Jinggoy is familiar with that. The Senate President is familiar with that. We just look for partners. In the time when I was Senate President, Your Honor, the Senate President, I gave my share actually to the Senate President, to Senator Chis Escudero, so that he'll have a full membership of the CA. Kasi kalahati ko siya. Wala akong kahati dahil ako yung presiding officer ng CA. So yung punto ko po dyan, Mr. President, kawawa naman yung 0.5 seat ng minority. 0.5 na lang tatanggalin nyo pa at ibibigay nyo pa sa iba. Papayag kami na may kahati po kami sa minority, sa majority. Yung minority sana, pabigyan na makaupo din. Whether it's the first half or the second half of the 20th Congress. But that would have been the more ideal situation, Mr. President. Na kung gusto nyo, ako pumapayag nga ako, mag-toss coin na lang. Para sa ganun, sinong uupo sa majority, sinong uupo sa minority sa first half and second half. But really, hindi natin matanggal na meron talagang kahati kami doon sa posisyon na yan. Dati, nung panahon ni Senator, when I was Senate President, walang problema yung minority dahil dalawa lang po sila, Mr. President. So obviously, it was either Senator Coco or Senator Risa. Pero ito 5 po kami. So kung 5 po kami, that entitles us to about 2.5 seats in the CA. So yan lang pong apela natin, that by tradition, we don't have any problem like this because naghahanap po tayo na kahati. Kung wala po tayong kahati, di toss coin na lang po yung kalahati. Sinong upo muna at sinong upo huli. Pero you cannot rob us from that 0.5 right of us to be able to sit in the Commission on Appointments.
Mr. President.
Noted.
With the
So,
permission of the
President.
minority leader, I'm sorry I took his time.
The remarks of the gentleman is noted.
Mr. President.
The minority leader is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. We were expecting at least some kind of cooperation or acknowledgement of the members of the minority before the majority leader all of a sudden stands up. The members of the majority have been talking to us eh. Nakikipag-usap. Kanina lang, kinausap kami ng President Pro Tem. Ngayon, biglang titindig itong majority leader na biglang he will be ramming down our throats. 10 members of the majority, all of a sudden. We're expecting more cooperation and more better treatment for the minority because we're trying to our best to treat you as well. Because we can make it harder for you if this is what you want. Kaya we were expecting, something better. Konting pakisamahan naman dito, it's been that way since before. Pero kung ganyan ang gagawin natin, kasi the other members of the majority should know that ano lang to it's a matter of party representation And if we do that, if we follow the party representation, simpleng-simple 6 NPCs, 3 upo. They decide sino 3. 2 po ang 5 ang Nationalista Party, 2.5. So may bakanting 0.5. Yung PDP laban 1 and 3. So 1.5. May isa at may bakanting 0.5. So pag pinagsama mo yun, 6 or 5. 6. And merong isang 0.5. And then there are 10 members who are either single members of the party or are independent. And in that case, 10 of them, 5 of them sits in the CA dapat. Yun ang dapat formula. Ganun lang kasimple dapat sana yung formula, Mr. President. Kung hindi naman, andun yung alternative formula which is majority-minority, okay. Pero we were expecting, the simple respect to the members of the minority na kinakausap naman kami. Hindi kami salimpusa dito. We can make this easy for you and we can make it also difficult for you. We leave it up to you, Mr. President. My objection stands. I don't think we should continue with the election until we have discussed this properly, Mr. President.
What
Mr.
does the
President, if I may,
leader
Mr.
say?
President, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, God is my witness. And We have been talking to the members of the minority. The minority leader even mentioned that we were talking to him, Mr. President, and the members of the minority. Senator Mig Zubiri, Senator Lauren Legarda is also aware of this for quite some time before the lull, Mr. President, during the order of business. Our Senate President Pro Temp again reiterated our request and our intention to actually move for this motion because, Mr. President, under the Constitution, the CA shall be constituted within 30 days after the Senate and the HOR shall have been organized with the election of the Senate President and the Speaker of the House. The Senate was organized, Mr. President, July 28. Therefore, Mr. President, the Commission on Appointments must be constituted not later than August 27. And that's next week, Mr. President, and we still have to issue notices, etc. Now, Mr. President, on the statements, and I sincerely respect our former Senate President, Mig Zubiri. Mr. President, let me just point out, Mr. President, no one's robbing of anything because we're doing this on the basis of the Supreme Court decisions, Mr. President. Mr. President, and if I may again, Mr. President, it is submitted, if the tradition, Mr. President, the concern here now, Mr. President, is can tradition on informal agreements between senators be cited in determining how many members from the majority and the minority blocks will be represented in the CA? Mr. President, again, this representation submits that we stick to the established mathematical formula and the use of Supreme Court decisions as guidance, Mr. President. Kaya po nagbigay sila ng desisyon so that we can be guided accordingly in determining the proportional representation in the CA. In the SC resolution, again, Mr. President, on Gingona versus Gonzales, the court said, no practice or tradition established by a mere tolerance can, without judicial acquiescence, ripen into a doctrine of practical construction of the fundamental law. In the same decision, Mr. President, in the Gingona resolution, it also states, who decides the question of proportionality, Mr. President? Who decides? The power to choose who among them will sit as members of the Commission on Appointments belong to the Senate, Mr. President. And that's why, Mr. President, even this representation who made that motion will submit to the decision of every member of the Senate. And furthermore, Mr. President, in the Coseteng versus Mitra, the Supreme Court again pointed out the other political parties or groups, and I quote, other political parties or groups in the House, such as petitioners, kaiba, which is presumably the member also with the coalition majority. Ang sabi po ng Supreme Court, are bound by the majority's choices. Mr. President, last but not the least, as much as we wanted to entertain the idea of coin tossing, Mr. President. My sister won in the mayoralty election in Bukawi by coin toss, Mr. President. But we have no precedence on this matter, Mr. President. And again, let me submit for the record that the Supreme Court provided us guidelines with all due respect to our colleagues, especially in the minority. Thank you, Mr.
The
President.
minority leaders.
Yes,
recognized.
thank you, Mr. President. The Gingona versus Gonzales issue should be the prevailing, not the Mitra or Coseteng versus Mitra, as mentioned earlier by the majority leader. The interpretation of Constitution Article 6, Section 1, Section 18 is very clear. Basis of proportional representation from political parties and party organizations. Ang linaw nun eh. Walang sinasabi itong majority and minority.
Mr. President, if I may, I believe
The
the
majority
party,
leader is
the party organization is the minority and the majority. And I submit again, Mr. President, hindi po ako magmamagaling-galingan or magsasabing eksperto dito, but nais ko, Mr. President, na isubmit itong aking posisyon sa body, Mr. President, at maging sa mga kasama natin dito sa bulwagang ito, Mr. President.
Mr. President, di mo pwedeng sabihin yung laman ng Constitution ng parties, organizations, meaning majority and minority. That is a very poor interpretation, Mr. President. Ang linaw eh. the basis of proportional representation from the political parties and parties or organizations registered under the party list system represented therein. Hindi ko makikita yung majority-minority doon, Mr. President. So I think kung sa mga simple membership ng mga committee, kinukonsulta members ng minority, kinukonsulta bawat member sila, bakit hindi sa napaka-importanting body like the Commission on Appointments? But hindi makakonsulta? The President pro tempore was talking to us about it just a few minutes ago. That's the point, Mr. President. Bakit ganito? But then again, that is my appeal. And if it doesn't work, then let's work.
Mr. President, I submit, Mr. President, I think we have been debating on this, Mr. President. Again, that is the position of this representation, and we submit it, Mr. President.
Before acting on the motion of the Majority Leader duly objected to by the distinguished Minority Floor Leader, Chair would like to state for the record that neither the majority nor the minority has a monopoly of interpreting what the Supreme Court said in regard to the Supreme Court decision on the composition of the Commission on Appointments. In fact, that is the reason why in no less than 8 occasions, cases were brought before the Supreme Court precisely on the composition of the Commission on Appointments, beginning as early as 1951, the latest being in 2009. And the Senate is a deliberative body. The Supreme Court said it is the Senate that decides on these matters. Chair takes exception to the statement that this is being rammed because we debated on it, and when there is a motion duly objected to, our rules state very clearly that we should divide the House by acting on that clear difference in opinion with respect to matters that the Senate needs to act upon, specifically that we should constitute and organize the Commission on Appointments within 30 days after the organization of both the House and the Senate. That date lapsing on August 27, 2025. What is the pleasure of Senator Cayetano?
Sir President, aside from, with the permission of both the Majority Leader, Minority Leader, of course, as a former diplomat, I'd rather na mag-usap, and I think nag-uusap ng the last 2 weeks. Unfortunately, I think hindi umuusad yung point na mag-agree. But I was once in the position of the Minority Leader, and he was the Majority Leader. So I do understand the duty of Senator Soto not only to stand up here, but to make sure that in the CA, there is more representation for the minority. However, this is also unique because both the Senate President and the Minority Leader are from the NPC, which is not the first time because this happened during the time of the LDP, precisely because we're one of the 3 countries in the world, or 4, that presidential pero multi-party. Usually kasi pag presidential, 2 parties lang. So medyo malinaw yung representation. Having said that, my appeal lang is that kung hindi nga mapag-uusapan, aside from the 30-day, the 2 pending, aside from the diplomats and the military officers, it is the Secretary of Energy and Secretary of DNR. We all know that it's not only DPWH and flood control projects ang nag-cause ng baha. We also know that whether it's reclamations or kulang ng ECC, whether it's mga ilog na tinambakan, DNR yan eh. And we also know that ang laki ng problema sa kuryente in some parts of the Philippines. So I mean, further delay would might benefit us sa pag-uusap, but it will damage, the discussions of this with the secretaries, because the CA is such a powerful tool to get the secretaries on the right track. At kung hindi dapat sila i-confirm, hindi i-confirm. Kung i-confirm, through our collective efforts, I think itong flooding at saka itong kuryente madidiscuss na maaga. So I just like to empathize with both the Majority and Minority Leader, but emphasize that we have to decide sooner than later. Thank you, Mr. President.
Noted and entered into the records. What is the pleasure of the Honorable Zubiri?
Maybe there's still, we can ask for a minute suspension. Maybe there's still some diplomacy left in this situation. Since the former Secretary of Foreign Affairs stood up and said that he could help in the diplomacy or this issue particularly.
Instead of suspending, so as to make the most out of the time of the Senate, can we defer acting on the motion of the majority leader duly objected to and take up some of the reference of business
That's okay.
while waiting, and thereafter we shall proceed to act on the motion of the majority floor leader with the permission of Senator Zubiri and the minority.
Okay.
Chair hereby defers acting on the motion duly objected to by the minority leader to elect the 10 members of the Commission on Appointments. Majority leader?
Mr. President, move that we proceed with the additional reference of business.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved. Secretary is directed to comply.
Additional reference of business bills on first reading, Senate number 551. An act providing for the issuance of a list of low-lying areas of the Philippine territory vulnerable to rising sea levels as a result of climate change and areas at high risk for natural disasters, mandating the DNR, DOST, Climate Change Commission, and other concerned government agencies for its regular updating, appropriating funds therefore, and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Environment, Natural Resources and Climate Change, Science and Technology, and Finance.
552, providing for the strategic exploration, development, utilization, and conservation of mineral resources for the benefit of local industries and communities and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Environment, Natural Resources, and Climate Change, and Ways and Means.
553, an act defining and penalizing espionage and other offenses against national security, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committee on National Defense and Security, Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation.
554, an act integrating voter education in the junior and senior high school curricula, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Basic Education and Electoral Reforms and People's Participation.
555, integrating labor education in the senior high school curriculum, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Basic Education and Labor Employment and Human Resources Development.
556, an act prohibiting the selling and or buying of admission tickets through unauthorized sales channels, providing penalties and for other purposes, Senator Villanueva.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship.
557, prohibiting the extraordinary rendition of persons to foreign jurisdictions, Senator Marcos.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Foreign Relations.
558, recognizing the rights of natural ecosystems, populations, and processes, and providing mechanisms for the protection and enforcement thereof, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Environment and Natural Resources and Climate Change, Justice, Human Rights, and Finance.
559, preventing, mitigating, and responding to risks affecting children while on vacation, engaging in leisure, or participating in any other activities related to the tourism industry.
To the
Senator
Committees
Ontiveros.
on Women, Children, Family Relations, Gender Equality, and Tourism.
560, an act establishing the National Coastal Greenbelt Program, providing funds and for other purposes, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Environment, Natural Resources, Climate Change, and Finance.
561, an act providing for the Magna Carta for Children, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, and Finance.
560, an act to ensure gender-responsive and inclusive protocols and programming to address the gender-differentiated needs of women during emergencies, including public health concerns, pandemics, and natural and man-made disasters, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, Health and Demography, and Finance.
563, an act providing for a comprehensive and responsive civil registration and vital statistics system, providing funds and for other purposes, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights and Finance.
564, an act strengthening the regulatory system in the country to prevent counterfeit pharmaceutical products, declaring large-scale counterfeiting activities as an offense involving economic sabotage, providing for the prohibition and penalties for violations thereof, and repealing for the purpose RA 8203, the special law on counterfeit drugs, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Justice and Human Rights, and Finance.
565, amending Republic Act number 11313, the Safe Spaces Act, and for other purposes, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, and Justice and Human Rights.
566, an act providing for a Magna Carta for workers, enterprises, and organizations in the informal economy, and institutionalizing mechanisms for recognition, the integration, and transition to the formal economy for implementation thereof, and for other purposes, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Labor, Employment, and Human Resources Development, Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development, and Finance.
567, an act protecting the rights of internally displaced persons and penalizing the acts of arbitrary internal displacement, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Justice and Human Rights, Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development, Ways and Means, and Finance.
568, ordaining the promotion of social enterprises to alleviate poverty, establishing for the purpose the Poverty Reduction through Social Entrepreneurship Program, and providing support, benefits, and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development, Ways and Means, and Finance.
569, instituting a national land use and management policy, providing for the implementation implementing mechanisms therefore and for other purposes, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation and Futures Thinking, and Finance.
570, creating the National Transitional Justice Reconciliation and Commission for the Bangsamoro, establishing a Transitional Justice and Reconciliation Program for the Bangsamoro, appropriating funds therefore, Senator
To
Ontiveros.
the Committees on Local Government, National Defense and Security, Peace, Unification and Reconciliation, and Finance.
571, an act strengthening water service cooperatives, establishing for this purpose the Local Water Service Cooperatives Development Fund and providing support programs for their growth and development, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Cooperatives, Public Services, Ways and Means, and Finance.
572, providing for the revised cooperative code of the Philippines, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Cooperatives, Constitutional Amendments and Revision of Codes, Ways and Means, and Finance.
573, establishing Local Cooperatives Development Fund and appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Cooperatives, Local Government, and Finance.
574, increasing the salary grade level of social worker position from salary grade 11 to salary grade 15 and providing funds therefore, Senator
To the
Ontiveros.
Committees on Civil Service, Government Organization and Professional Regulation, Social Justice, Welfare, and Rural Development, and Finance.
575, providing for hospital and healthcare benefits for public and private school teachers and their dependents and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Basic Education, Health and Demography, Ways and Means, and Finance.
576, providing for a Magna Carta of tricycle drivers and operators and institutionalizing the mechanisms for its implementation, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Public Services and Local Government.
577, promoting national awareness to the mandatory study of the West Philippine Sea in public and private educational institutions, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committee on Basic Education and Finance.
578, declaring July 12 as the National West Philippine Sea Victory Day in commemoration of the Philippines' triumph before the Permanent Court of Arbitration, Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committees on Foreign Relations and Finance.
579, strengthening the barangay unit through support for barangay officials and barangay volunteer workers, amending RA 7160, providing funds therefore and for other purposes, Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Local Government, Health and Demography, and Finance.
580, granting retirement benefits to all elective or appointed barangay officials who have rendered a consecutive period of 9 years or 3 terms of public service in the barangay, appropriating funds therefore, Senator Zubiri.
To the Committees on Local Government and Corporations and Government Corporations and Public Enterprises and Finance.
581, an act to promote rural health by providing for an accelerated program for the construction of a potable water supply system in every barangay in the country within 3 years, Senator Zubiri.
To the Committee on Sustainable Development Goals, Innovation and Futures Thinking, Local Government, and Finance.
582, establishing quality standards for mineral, carbonated, and other bottled water, Senator
To
Zubiri.
the Committee on Health and Demography, Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, and Finance.
583, an act amending Commonwealth Act 473, the revised naturalization law, and for other purposes, Senator Zubiri.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
584, an act providing for a new charter of the Development Bank of the Philippines, repealing for the purpose EO 81 as amended, Senator Villar M.
To the Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions and Currencies, and Government Corporations and Public Enterprises.
585, an act providing for a new charter of the Land Bank of the Philippines, repealing for the purpose Section 74 to 100 of RA 3844 or the Agricultural Land Reform Code as amended, Senator Villar M.
To the Committees on Banks, Financial Institutions and Currencies, and Government Corporations and Public Enterprises.
586, an act regulating the manufacturing, importation, and use of single-use plastic products and providing penalties, levies, and an incentive system for industries, business enterprises, and consumers thereof, Senator Villar M.
To the Committees on Environment, Natural Resources and Climate Change, Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, Ways and Means, and Finance.
587, an act providing a socialized microfinancing program for microenterprises, thereby promoting entrepreneurship, Senator Villar M.
To the Committees on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, Economic Affairs, and Finance.
588, an act providing for a comprehensive, accessible, and affordable early detection and timely intervention services for children with special needs, Senator Villar M.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, and Finance.
589, establishing green lanes for purposes of streamlining the permitting and licensing of strategic investments, Senator Villar M.
To the Committees on Trade, Commerce, and Entrepreneurship, Ways and Means, and Finance.
590, establishing and organizing the Philippine Electronic Sports Commission and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Villar M.
To the Committees on Sports, Civil Service, Government Organization and Professional Regulation, and Finance.
591, promoting the adoption of stray and impounded animals by providing incentives, Senator Villar M.
To the Committees on Agriculture, Food and Agrarian Reform, Local Government, and Ways and Means.
592, establishing a credit assistance program for overseas Filipino workers, Senator Villar M.
To the Committees on Migrant Workers and Finance.
593, safeguarding the health of Filipino mothers at the time of their childbirth, providing protective mechanism therefore, Senator Villar M.
To the Committees on Health and Demography and Local Government.
594, modernizing the Philippine Orthopedic Center, enhancing its healthcare services, appropriating funds therefore, Senator Tulfo E.
To the Committees on Health and Demography and Finance.
595, establishing safeguards for the use of social media by minors, promoting a safe and age-appropriate digital environment, and protecting minors from digital addiction and for other purposes, Senator Tulfo E.
To the Committees on Science and Technology and Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality.
596, establishing the geriatric specialty centers and the DOH-retained hospitals and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Tulfo E.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Ways and Means, and Finance.
597, amending RA 7309, and creating a board of claims under the DOJ for victims of unjust imprisonment or detention and victims of violent crimes and for other purposes, Senator Tulfo E.
To the Committee on Justice and Human Rights, Social Justice, Welfare and Rural Development, and Finance.
598, an act rationalizing the workload of public school teachers and for other purposes, Senator Tulfo E.
To the Committees on Basic Education and Finance.
599, providing services to Muslim Filipino pilgrims through the privatization of the annual Hajj pilgrimage, amending RA 9997, the National Commission on Muslim Filipinos Act of 2009, and for other purposes, Senator Padilla.
To the Committee on Cultural Communities and Muslim Affairs.
Senate number 600, an act institutionalizing civil partnership of same-sex couples, establishing their rights and obligations, and for other purposes, Senator Padilla.
To the Committee on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality. Session is suspended.
Gintod pilak, inaakit ang iyong mga mata. Kapang